Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, January 22nd, 2013, and by golly, almost right on cue, another college shooting taking place to fan the flames of the gun grabbers out there. And they're going to keep on doing it until they get their way, or until the American people stand up and say, we don't believe these anymore. We just do not believe these. This is all staged by the government to trick us out of our Second Amendment. All right, we'll be looking at the details of that one a little bit, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about Sandy Hook further into the show. Reminder that Claire will be joining us on our third hour on Friday. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. The lovely Miss Crystal is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of troubles and ready to answer your calls when you call on. And I was going to open the show talking about the inauguration oath-on, because this morning the corporate media was all about going to the church and what did Michelle wear, and then all of a sudden we've got this breaking story: shooter on campus, Texas college, students asked to shelter in place. They're showing an aerial shot of somebody on a gurney being loaded into an ambulance. And so once again, it appears that we're going to see more and more of these staged events to try and build a fury to get rid of the guns. And, of course, what they're obviously overlooking in all these shootings, these kids are on SSRIs. There was another one down in New Mexico. Kid went on a rampage, shot his family, then went out, said he was going to just start shooting people at random until the police killed him. That's a classic pattern of these prescription antidepressants. And they don't want to talk about it because the agenda is to disarm the American people. Then next they'll come for your gold, and after that they'll come for your children for these wars of conquest. That is the agenda. Now, people are asking, will the U.S. follow Germany's example because they have a national gun registry? You know, this is the nation that invented Nazism. And they're registering all guns in advance of a potential gun grab. We're seeing it all over. I mean, crazy attempts to globally disarm ordinary people so the fascist New World Order can prey on you with impunity here. So we're talking about this situation down in New Mexico, where this Nehemiah Grigo, 15-year-old, was arrested after shooting his mother. His parents, actually, both of his siblings. Then he ran out, and according to statements he made to the police, he had been having suicidal and homicidal thoughts, and his plan was to go out and just start shooting people at random until the police killed him. This is a classic reaction to these prescription antidepressants or withdrawing from same. And again, go over to ssristories.com and you will read time and again. Thousands of these cases have happened. And the government and the corporate media do not want to touch this because the agenda is to disarm the American people. And the usage of these medications is growing because they're hugely profitable. By the way, when the New Mexico story first broke, the media was saying it was an AR-15 assault rifle. Now they're back to saying it was an ordinary run-of-the-mill .22 caliber rifle that he used in the killing. But no, we've got to push assault weapons. We've got to do that. It's obviously so skewed to benefit the gun grabbers on this story. Meanwhile, another story that happened that is not getting a lot of media play: surveillance camera in a Tucson home caught the homeowner chasing off an invading gang with a legally owned firearm. And you're not going to hear about that. They don't want you to know how many crimes are thwarted by law-abiding citizens with legally owned firearms every year. They want you dependent on the police. They want you dependent on the government because dependency is slavery. And that is the agenda here. Over in Wagner County, the Oklahoma sheriff is saying he will not enforce any new gun legislation. Oak Harbor City Councilman Rick Almberg, on the other hand, walked out of a city council meeting because a citizen was there with a legally concealed firearm. All the forms filled out, no evidence of any threat, and this councilman walks out to express his displeasure about these armed Americans. How dare we let them have guns? They're not supposed to have guns. Yeah, we are. That's what the Second Amendment is for. And the United States Supreme Court ruled It's military weapons. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're following up on this breaking story of multiple people have been shot on a college campus in Texas. No report on whether there are injuries or deaths. I'm looking at the very first online news articles about the story. Comments are disabled for all of them, and we know why. And this is going to relate to your assignment, your homework assignment, your mission, should you choose to accept it. Anywhere you see this story today, get into the comments section and say 90% of these mass shootings involve perpetrators who are either on or withdrawing from prescription antidepressants. We demand to know what medications these people are on. And include a link to ssristories.com. This is the cause of the violence, not the guns, but they want to blame the guns to take them away from you. The gun grab is on because the government and the money junkies realize they've pushed the American people to the brink. The evils are no longer sufferable. And they're desperate to disarm us before they give us the really bad news that we're going to have to give up all of our gold that we bought as a hedge against the banker-created inflation. We're going to have to give up our children for more wars of conquest. They're getting ready to crank up war with China now. When they take away their guns, it guarantees you will do what you're told to do by the government, and that is not what America is supposed to be about. We are at exactly the situation Thomas Jefferson warned us about. This is just too convenient. Now, going back and looking at Obama's 23 executive orders where they are, talking about checking for mentally ill people, whether they should have guns or not, which on the face of it sounds like a really good idea. But when you look at the latest version of the diagnostic manual coming out of the American Psychiatric Association, everybody's got a mental illness. Every normal human behavior has been recategorized as a mental illness in order to sell you a medication for it and can be used as an excuse to deny you your Second Amendment rights. And they will not look at the fact that all of these mass shootings, 90% of them, possibly more, involve perpetrators who were on these medications. The one down in New Mexico is a classic example. He was literally telling people, I'm having these strange homicidal, suicidal thoughts. And then he kills his family, and he goes out to basically shoot people until the police kill him. That is a classic pattern we have seen time and time and time again. And nobody in the corporate media will touch it. Nobody in government will touch it. The agenda is blame the guns for all of this insanity that is being induced by these drugs. The gun grabbers are wasting no time. On the second day of the 60-day legislative session in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Representative Miguel Garcia introduced House Bill 77, imposing more sweeping restrictions on firearm sales. They don't want you to be able to say no. They're taking away your right to say no. Free people can say no. Slaves cannot say no. There is no freedom without the freedom to say no. Now, according to one report down there in Texas, they've already got a suspect in custody, and yet the corporate media is saying the SWAT team is going in. They're going to go in and clean this up. They're pounding this for all it's worth. And they will report on every little tiny aspect of this case except one, is the shooter on prescription medications. Glendale is looking at an ordinance to ban all gun shows within city limits. The push is on. This is the full court press to take away your right to resist tyranny. They've run into a brick wall. They're raising on a busted flush here. Gun sales are right through the roof. People are saying we will not comply with an unconstitutional law. Even Bill Clinton said, be very careful that you don't underestimate the resistance in the American population to these attacks on the Second Amendment and the First Amendment here. There's talk about how the House of Representatives should stand up to Obama on the gun grab here. Now let's get back to these medications. Interesting story out of NBC. ADHD in kids jumps 24% in a decade. It's a runaway crisis. All of our kids have ADHD. The rates have jumped 90%. along with the profits from ADHD medications. It's a big money-making venture, and they're turning our kids into brain-fried zombies ready to pull the trigger on others or themselves, and it doesn't matter because it's making money. And here's the real kicker. We put up this story from the Trenches World Report. Schools are financially rewarded for every student diagnosed as ADD or ADHD. They're getting added funding. Oh, we've got so many ADHD students. Well, here's some additional cash. They're financially incentivizing the diagnosis of kids with ADHD. They get put on these medications. They commit these acts of violence. Oh, my goodness, it's the fault of the guns. If you go over to ssristories.com, you will find out that these people who are on these antidepressants or withdrawing from the antidepressants don't always use guns. They've used baseball bats. They've used hammers. They've used cars. They've used knives. It's not the guns, it's the medication. This is the biggest scandal in modern medical history. And nobody wants to talk about it in the corporate media because they're enslaved to those huge advertising contracts, and nobody in government wants to talk about it because the agenda is to grab the guns. Congress knows there's a problem. They held hearings. They won't do anything about it. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Barbara in Illinois. Aloha, Barbara. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm an old tough cookie.
Good.
I'm a victim of the MK Ultra experiment since 1964.
Mm-hmm. So is Timothy Leary. That's where all that the LSD craze in the 60s began when it was being tested on college volunteers during MK Ultra. And then and everybody said, hey, this stuff is fun. I want to get some more of it. And so this whole scourge of acid heads was actually inadvertently triggered by the MK Ultra program.
How do we get a message to the president?
The president already knows. He doesn't care. He does not
he's
care.
Reinstated. Well, he has to do something. And so does our elected officials, or else they are to be released without compensation of any kind.
Well, I'm in agreement with on that last part, but Congress knows there's a problem with the SSRIs. The president knows there's problems with the SSRIs. They don't care. They're merely using these prescription pharmaceutical triggered acts of violence to push the anti-gun agenda. They are scared. They are desperate. They're looking basically at one of two outcomes. Either they just let the government and the Federal Reserve collapse, which they don't want to do because then the party's over, or they have to disarm the American people so they can keep on looting America to prop up Wall Street, sending our kids out to these wars of conquest. And they don't care what the reality is. Politics isn't concerned with science and fact. It's concerned with public perception. Politics is perception. They're managing perception. They really don't care. The real cause is SSRIs. They already know it's a problem. It's the classic pattern of politics. How can I use this to further my agenda? Not how can I solve the problem. Not how can I make our population healthy. How can I use this medically induced crisis to push my agenda for gun control? That is the way politicians think. These are not scientists. They're not engineers. Most of the people in Washington, D.C. are lawyers or very rich business owners. There are very few scientists and engineers in Congress. Ron Paul was a doctor. Of course, he's retired. It's not a representative body anymore. It doesn't represent we the people. There aren't enough teachers in there. There aren't enough bricklayers or road builders or people who actually know how to make things work. It's all a bunch of lawyers and money junkies. They've grown up gaming the system, and that's what they're doing now, gaming the system to take away our Second Amendment rights.
We have to have law and order restored, and everyone protected by law. Otherwise, we're all down the drain.
We are.
All.
We're heading there. We're heading down the Al-Qaeda right now. The rule of law is gone. The government has walked away from the Constitution, and now they're in a rush to basically bring about the transformation of this country into a complete fascist dictatorship where, by golly, you will work your life away, give the money to the money junkies, and breed lots of new soldiers to conquer all those other pesky nations who refuse private central banking.